Hello everyone, welcome to Sarkari. So today we'll be taking up newspaper for 12th April. So over here with the first article, electronics firms up in arms over new e-waste policy. Now the central issue revolves around the Indian government's recent move to tighten the e-waste regulation. This was done by setting a floor price that electronics manufacturers must pay recyclers. And this policy aims to formalize the recycling sector, curb hazardous practices by informal scrap dealers, and promote responsible e-waste management. So, India being the third largest e-waste generator after China and the US, recycling only 43% of its e-waste, which makes such regulations is crucial from an environmental perspective. Now, however, the policy it has faced strong opposition from global electronics giants like Samsung, Hitachi, as well as Indian firms such as Havells and Voltas. So these companies, they're arguing that the revised rules significantly increase the compliance cost up to 2 to 8% of the production cost, and they have a cascading effect on product prices. So they have challenged the policy in the court, claiming that it exceeds the government's powers and is unconstitutional. So the Environment Ministry has defended the measure, stating how it's reasonable within legal bounds and necessary for sustainable waste processing. So this basically highlights the tensions between the industrial interest and environmental responsibility and raising ethical questions around corporate social responsibility and the governance. Apart from that, it also reflects the challenge of implementing green policies in a developing economy where regulatory uncertainty it can deter the foreign investment. So we can look into this article from the perspective of regulatory governance, environmental ethics, and economic policy. Yeah, the next article, Digital Foundation will power AI in India, says Nilekani. So Nandan Nilekani remark highlights how India's robust digital public infrastructure, such as Aadhaar and UPI, it can serve as the foundation for scalable and inclusive AI adoption. So basically, it emphasizes that India is uniquely positioned to leverage AI at a population scale, focusing on affordability, inclusion, and responsible innovation. So he basically cautions against overhyping the AI, stressing upon the need for human-centric approach, which would enhance lives rather than replacing people. So, apart from that, this article also points out the growing public interest in non-human intelligence. Additionally, his advocacy for open source models, local language support, and natural interfaces addresses digital inclusion and linguistic diversity and key themes in policy making and governance. Basically, as a global leader in AI adoption grounded in equity, innovation, and public good. Sowing seeds of recession. So basically, this article is offering an analysis of the global trade dynamics and their economic implication, particularly in light of the US protectionist policies under Trump. So the imposition of steep reciprocal tariffs mirrors the protectionist era of the 1930s, especially the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which contributed to the Great Depression. And this article warns the tit-for-tat tariff escalation, which is between US and China, and which threatens to destabilize the rules-based multilateral trading system, which was established post World War II under institutions like the WTO. So, this undermines transparency, predictability, and fairness in international trade. And when we talk about for India, so this imposition of a 37% tariff burden, it poses a strategic challenge in the ongoing bilateral trade negotiations with the US. And for this, India it must strike a balance between safeguarding its trade interest and maintaining diplomatic ties. So basically, the broader message is that unilateralism in trade, as seen in the US actions, not only risks economic downturns, but it also erodes global trust and cooperation. So it's important when we talk of globalization, economic policies, and multilateralism. High degree of urgency. So this talks about India's evolving approach to bilateral and multilateral trade negotiations, particularly in context of global economic shift and strategic imperatives. So, in this, the External Minister Jaishankar's statement about a very high degree of urgency in concluding trade deals with US, EU, and UK basically reflects India's proactive engagement in securing its economic and strategic interest. Also, the remark highlights how the Trump's administration's unilateral trade posture necessitated recalibrated diplomacy and negotiations with both nations bringing strong view to the table. So, the trade deal with the US during Trump's first term and the renewed momentum post 2025, it basically shows the challenges of aligning a diverse economic interest in a shifting geopolitical climate, and it also brings out critical concerns around the weaponization of economic activities and the over concentration of manufacturing, which reinforces India's focus on building resilient and trusted global supply chains. So, this basically aligns with India's Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative and the goal of becoming a reliable global partner, especially when we talk of technology and trade. Niti Aayog calls for incentives for auto part. So the Niti Aayog's Vision 2030 has a goal to triple automotive component exports to $60 billion, which would aim to boost India's global value chain participation from right now 3% to 8%. And it would also generate a $25 billion trade surplus and create up to 2.5 million additional direct jobs. So this shows the sector's potential as a major employment generator as well. And despite being the fourth largest automobile producer, we still have a modest share in the global auto component trade and lack a strong presence in high precision segments such as engine parts and steering systems. So now we talk of the structural issues which limit India's competitiveness. So that includes high operating cost, infrastructure deficiencies, low R&D spend, weak global integration. And to address this, Niti Aayog recommends a mix of fiscal measures such as incentives, operational expenditure, and international branding, and non-fiscal interventions. So this basically aligns with the government's vision of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, while it also emphasizes the need for global collaboration, which would help in attracting investment and enhance innovation. Watchdog without a pause. So this article highlights the exemplary public service career of Pratyush Sinha, who's a retired IAS officer and former Chief Vigilance Commissioner. So it basically emphasizes how it's become a symbol of administrative accountability, particularly during the 2G spectrum scam investigation and his decisive action against corruption, including directing the CBI probe, is credited with catalyzing one of India's biggest anti-corruption crackdowns. So his post-retirement involvement, including chairing the SEBI Committee on Conflict of Interest and Disclosures, underscores the importance of institutional integrity and ethical governance, and also his role in investigating coal block allocation and developing India's coal index illustrates how retired civil servants they continue to play a critical role in policy reform and also ensuring accountability in the governance system. So we can link this with the ethics paper. Dollar slumps as US faces loss of confidence. Basically, the recent sharp slump in the US dollars, it signals a critical shift in global financial sentiment and reflects the waning confidence in the American economy. So traditionally viewed as a safe haven during period of volatility, the dollar's decline, it amid the already rising demand for alternative safe assets like gold and the Japanese yen, it basically suggests how investors they're reconsidering the US economic stability, especially when we talk of the trade policies under the Trump administration. So the development has significant implications for India. So the weaker dollar generally supports the Indian rupee. Particularly, it is also accompanied by falling oil prices as it reduces the import cost. So the currency appreciation, it may also reduce the export competitiveness. And the large scale sell of US government bonds, particularly by major holders like Japan and China, it has pushed bond yields higher and it basically signals growing skepticism about the US ability to manage its debt burden, which is broader repercussion on global capital flows. And India is also exposed to shifts in international investor sentiment. Why confidence in US dollar is flagging. So when we talk of decline, firstly decline in the confidence in the US dollar. So it's made the first most important point is Trump's tariffs and trade policies, which these policies are seen as disruptive to the global trading system and it can create uncertainty, impacting the dollar stability. And also there is comparison to the Nixon shock, which is the ending the global gold standard, and the Volcker shock, which is interest rates hike to combat inflation, basically suggest how Trump actions are another significant human-made global economic shocks. So over here, we can see in chart 2 how the US bond yields are rising while the dollar is falling. So this phenomena basically suggests how investors they may be demanding a higher premium for holding US debt, which possibly indicates concerns about the US economic outlook or fiscal management. Apart from that, it also shows how US current account deficit is reaching a record high, indicating continuous outflow of dollar to pay for imports and how persistent deficits can erode confidence in a currency. And apart from that, the article also talks of historical parallels, such as the Liz-Truss 2022 moment in UK, where unfunded tax cuts led to a sharp fall in the British pound and a surge in bond yields, suggesting a loss of investor confidence due to perceived policy missteps. And apart from that, a decline in confidence of US dollar, it can also have several implications in weakening the dollar, where we can see in the first chart how a loss of confidence led to depreciation of the dollar against other currencies and gold. Also increased borrowing cost, which the rising bond yields make it more expensive for the US government to finance its debt, and global economic instability. Since the US dollar status the world's reserve currency means that its instability it can have ripple effects across the global economy, and also how Trump's tariffs that talked about as human-made global shock, which is restructuring the global trading system. And by comparing the tariffs, the Nixon shock and the Volcker shock, this basically emphasizes the potential long-term transformative impact on the global economic order. Now, when we talk of the Nixon shock, this was in 1971, and it ended the Bretton Woods system of fixed exchange rates, which led to an era of floating exchange rates and fiat currencies. And Volcker shock, which was in early 1980s, was aggressive interest rate hikes by the US Federal Reserve to combat inflation, which had significant global repercussions, including the strengthening of the dollar and debt crisis in developing countries. Then, um, we can also talk about how US is importing significantly more goods, services, and income than it's exporting. So, large current account deficits, it can raise concerns about a country's external debt and the long-term sustainability of its economic position. So, this was mostly what the articles were talking about. The next article, why some in US wants to end popular work program for foreign student. Now, this is the debate around the optional practical training program for foreign students in the US. And this program, it basically allows international students to work in the US for a period of after graduation with a larger extension for STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics field, and how some in the US are advocating for ending this program, arguing that it may disadvantage American workers, supporters, and of the program. However, it also emphasizes its role in retaining talented graduates in critical fields and contributing to the US economy. So, this article basically notes the significant number of international students, including many from India, who participate in this OPT program. Now, this article talks about the Indian rupees appreciation of 64 paise, which is 0.74% against the US dollar, marking its largest gain in 2 months. And this surge is attributed to several factors. This includes weaker US dollar and strong performance in the Indian equity market, and also the decline of the US dollar index, which was driven by softer than expected inflation data and speculation of potential rate cuts by the US Federal Reserve, which played a key role in weakening the greenback. And we also talk about how the US government decision to pause reciprocal tariffs for 90 days provided some relief to the markets, further influencing the rupee's rise. Then crude oil prices trading at a 4-year low added to the positive sentiment. So lower oil prices, it reduced India's import bill and it eased the pressure on the currency. So basically, the geopolitical impacts of trade relations, particularly with US and China, can be seen. Kerala crisis. So Kerala paradox. Now, this article basically highlights the irony of a state with high social development indicators like health and education. They face a serious drug crisis. So, this basically prompts discussion on why such a paradox might exist. So, it talks about factors such as increased mobility and exposure, then changing social norms and breakdown of traditional support system, and also high literacy potentially leading to experimentation when the youth is going towards drugs. Also, the influx of migrant population. When we talk of the drug problem in Kerala, the number of cases and values of seizures, they indicate the severity of the issue. So it was 30,000 in 2024. Also, the transition from traditional plant-based drugs to synthetic drugs is a significant trend, which basically requires different strategies for control. And when we talk of rehabilitation, so understanding the implication of synthetic drugs is important over here. Apart from that, vulnerability of the youth is also important since the mention of children discussing drugs on buses and the lack of parental attention, it highlights the vulnerability of school-going children. So, analyzes the multi-pronged approach adopted by the Kerala government. Over here, we can talk about campaigns in schools and panchayats, which would basically help evaluate the importance of awareness and community involvement in the drug prevention. And we can talk about strengthening the surveillance. So, considering the role of technology and intelligence, which could help in curbing the drug trafficking. And when we talk of the key challenges which are highlighted in this article, the first is parental attention. The social factors contribute to the vulnerability of children. Also, inadequate teacher response to bullying. So, this also creates a negative school environment which might push vulnerable students towards substance abuse. Also, evolving tactics of drug mafias. So, this article mentions the awareness of stringent measures, implying the need for continuous adoption in law enforcement strategies. And when we talk of comparison with other states, the graphic showing cases under the NDPS Act in the top five states provides a comparative perspective. So while Kerala's number might be high, understanding the national context is important, and analyzing by certain states might be more effective than others. So this article implicitly suggests the need for sustained and multifaceted approach involving law enforcement, awareness campaigns, community participation, and understanding social issues. So if it drug abuse is not just in Kerala, it is actually a national problem with varying degrees of intensity in different states. So we can actually look into this from the country's perspective. Loving the ghost in machine. So this article basically explores the emerging phenomena of emotional and romantic relationship with AI companion bots and highlighting the psychological, societal, and ethical implication. So it's about a young woman from Mumbai who, while being in a stable real life relationship, created an aggressive bad boy AI bot and formed deep emotional and even sexual attachment to it. So this reflects a growing trend where individuals, often battling loneliness, they turn to AI chatbot for validation, emotional support, and intimacy. So the World Health Organization, it has recognized loneliness as a global health threat with increasing numbers across all age groups experiencing social isolation. So AI, it has rapidly gained popularity of offering customizable bots that mimic real human interaction, often blurring the lines between digital comfort and emotional dependency. So the rise of AI companionship is particularly noticeable among teens and young adults who view these interactions as safe and judgment-free. So, experts argue how these bots provide instant gratification and the illusion of perfect understanding, shifting users away from the complexities of human relationship. And this growing reliance raises concerns about emotional development, especially when we talk of the young users who are still forming social skills and identities. And this article also talks about data privacy risk, emotional overdependence, and a growing disconnect from real life interactions. So basically, we can talk about the need for therapy models to evolve, and we can address the root causes of this dependence and promoting real life alternatives to emotional support. So, importance of regulation, age restrictions, emotional safety mechanism, and transparency in the AI system, which would help us prevent any harm. And even the article, uh, the side article, when AI does talking and all the relationship, this also explores the emotional and romantic relationship with AI companion bots. So experts, they basically warn how these interactions hinder social development, blur the reality, and pose data privacy risks. So they basically challenge the foundation of real human relationships and urge society to strike a balance between technological progress and emotional well-being. Large countries agree on first ever global tax on greenhouse gases. So this is how the major shipping nations have agreed to impose the world's first global tax on greenhouse gases emissions. And starting in 2028, a minimum tax of $100 per ton of carbon dioxide will be levied on ships whose emissions aren't already offset. And the decision made by members of the International Maritime Organization, it basically aims to curb the roughly 3% of global emissions produced by the shipping industry. And environmentalists welcome the step as historic, how it may not generate enough funds to help developing nations shift to cleaner shipping methods. The Supreme Court sets time frame for President on referred bill. So the Supreme Court has set a 3-month time frame for President to decide on state bills referred by governors under Article 201 of the Constitution. And the bench of justice said that delays they must be justified with reasons communicated to the concerned state. And while the Constitution does not specify a timeline, the court emphasized that prolonged inaction is unconstitutional and undermines federalism. The court cited how past commissions and central guidelines recommending shift handling of such matters. It clarified how the president, like the governor, cannot exercise an absolute veto and must provide sound reasons when withholding assets. So courts, it can intervene if constitutional authorities delay actions unreasonably. In Tamil Nadu village named as case study for workflow support for new act. Talk about the Thiruchendurai village in Tamil Nadu, Tiruchirappallai district, cited by Union Minister as a case study during the bill debate, has seen celebrations with local welcoming the new Works Amendment Act 2025, and the residents of the Graham, which is a Brahmin dominated area, claim the law has settled a long standing land dispute with the Tamil Nadu Works Board. And this controversy began in 2022 when former Raju Gopal he was asked to get a no objection certificate from the Works Board to sell his land, which sparked protests, especially among Agraham residents who denied any past claims from the board. And then the Waqf board had to clarify how it only claimed land donated in the 18th century, not the entire village. So the residents insisted the land was theirs and for their generation with no rent paid to the board. So the opposition has criticized the act as unconstitutional. Locals in Agraham has seen it as a relief. And some Muslim residents, meanwhile, say that they face no issues with land ownership and dismiss this political narratives. A second 1991 moment. This article makes a compelling case as how Trump's new tariffs, which were initially seen as chaotic and protectionist, could actually serve as a powerful external shock to jolt India out of its long-standing economic complacency. So the Trump tariffs are framed as reciprocals, and the real target is China, whose long withstanding policies and grand strategies to displace the US as the global economic hegemon have fueled its rise. So, in contrast, India just had stagnated in a state of comfort, maintaining restrictive trade and FDI policies simply because growth has been decent enough at 6.2% annually. So this comfort has basically become a barrier to reform evidence by declining FDI, lack of industrial upgrades, and fear of opening markets. So India's 2015 model bilateral investment treaty and bureaucratic inertia reflect this inward-looking mindset. So with a young, educated, AI-ready workforce and a narrowing demographic window, India stands at crossroads. So the geopolitical alignment with the West and the promise of US-India bilateral trade agreement, it offers a rare opening to enact a new way of liberalization. And if India chooses reform over comfort, it could spark a second 1991 movement, which when reposition it as a global industrial and strategic power. Trying to be seen, the rising of influencer culture. So this is particularly when we talk of platforms like Instagram, which has fundamentally transformed consumption into a tool of self-expression and social validation. So something which was once a simple act of buying products for utility now serves as a means of signaling status, taste, and identity. So influencers who initially seemed like relatable figures now blur the line between personal recommendations and marketing, turning consumption into an emotional process. So this shift has led to widespread adoption of conspicuous consumption in a more subtle form, where products like the Stanley Cup or Dyson Airwrap, they're not just items, but they're symbols of belonging to a certain lifestyle or a tribe. So social media influence, it has created an emotional dependency on constant purchasing driven by dissatisfaction and a desire to fit in. So influencing market it has grown into a multi-billion dollar industry, and it raises ethical concerns about authenticity and consumer manipulation, with many consumers unaware of the distinction between genuine recommendations and paid promotion. Even mental health implications, such as anxiety and feelings of inadequacy, are also significant as individuals increasingly measure their worth through material possessions showcased online. So, by fostering critical thinking, encouraging sustainable practices, societies they can better navigate the complexities of digital consumption while maintaining authenticity in a world increasingly shaped by social media. Waiting for a teacher crisis in West Bengal. So the teacher recruitment crisis in West Bengal highlights systematic issues in India's education sector. How delayed recruitment, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and corruptions have led to a chronic teacher shortage in government schools, resulting in unqualified teachers being assigned to subjects they're not trained for. So unlike the private schools, government schools lack the flexibility to hire teachers quickly with mass recruitment processes and slow appointments. So this inefficiency combined with excessive administrative work impacts the quality of teaching. And to address this, the government schools they should be granted more autonomy in teacher selection, and the recruitment process must be streamlined to ensure timely appointments. So, prioritizing the education reforms and filling vacancies quickly and improving the overall quality of government school education, ensuring how equal opportunity is there for all students. Baba Sahib like Gandhi. So basically, this article talks about relationship between Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi, which was marked by both ideological differences and common ground. So Ambedkar, he criticized Gandhi for his lifelong support of orthodox Varnashram Dharma while portraying himself as an opponent of untouchability. So for Ambedkar, the issue of untouchability was a political one with emphasis on providing political and social rights to the untouchables rather than focusing on the social reforms through temple entry. When we talk of Mahatma Gandhi on this perspective, he believed in a more ethical and moral freedom. So he focused on soul reform, and their most significant disagreement emerged from the differing views on independence. So for Ambedkar, it was advocating for political action to uplift the marginalized, and Gandhi emphasizing the individual moral transformation. So despite the differences, both leaders they shared common views on the use of violence and communism, both rejecting the violent approach of communism and preferred peaceful means to achieve social change. So, even though both of them had different perspectives, the ultimate goal of societal individual upliftment remained central to both leaders' philosophies. And this comparison it highlights the importance of understanding complex political ideological legacies, how both Ambedkar and Gandhi contribute to India's freedom struggle and social reform, which was monumental. Their views offer valuable insights into the socio-political fabric of the nation, making them a crucial figure to study for any understanding of modern India's challenge and solutions to social inequality. Then we have the last article, why SEBI sets a panel to revise conflict of interest law. So basically, SEBI it has set up a high-level committee to review and strengthen its conflict of the interest and disclosure framework for board members and senior officials. So this committee basically aims to enhance transparency, ethical conduct, and accountability by addressing existing policies and identifying gaps. So it would recommend measures like recusal policies, public disclosures, investment restrictions, and a robust monitoring system. And this was followed by the allegations against former SEBI chairperson. So, while the allegations they were denied, they did raise concern about SEBI's transparency and the committee's finding expect in 3 months. It will basically focus on creating a practical framework to address conflicts of interest with inputs from experts across various fields. This was it for today. Thank you, everyone.